Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Jacob becomes Israel. Israel, Yisrael, the one who struggles with God, the people who struggle with God. What does it mean? What's that struggling about? What is that struggling? How are we the people who struggle with God? So it's a context to the story. So we've been reading over the last few weeks. Jacob stole the blessing from his brother Esau, fooled him and his father. Then he had to run, and he spent 20 years where he was being fooled by his father-in-law, by Laban. But at the end of it, he found his feet. He did make his way, and he had a large family, he had a household, he had servants, he had wealth. And so this week he returns home. But as we heard, the messengers bring back the report of 400 armed men are coming his way. And so Jacob prays to God. He prays to God for help. He sends his family in two directions while he's left alone. And then the Torah says this: a figure wrestled with him until the break of dawn. So all night long he wrestled. And so what is this wrestling? We hear about this every year, but what is this wrestling about? And so in Hebrew, the word is an unusual word for wrestling, and it means something like entangling or twisting or attaching. All of that all those relationship words. And the word in Hebrew actually appears to be the word avak, which means dust. And so the Midrash says, what was this fighting and wrestling? It was a kind that had so much wrestling that this dust was coming up from the ground. They couldn't see. It was just this tumbling and wrestling, and couldn't make sense of what was happening. And so what was this wrestling? It was a wrestling that you couldn't see or make sense of or explain. There was dust everywhere. Was it a person? Was it an angel? Just this tumbling, inner and outer battle. We've all experienced it. So some of the commentators say, well, this is just the kind of battle that Israel as a nation has to deal with throughout its history. Wrestling with all these nations, Edom, Rome, the West. Others say this was purely personal, what Jacob was going through from his whole life, coming to this one moment of resolution, of struggle. On the one hand, here was Jacob, now this new person, a father, a husband, over 20 years grown, a moment that's little talk about, but at the end of the last week's Parsha, Jacob finally confronts his uncle Laban and said, you made me work for 20 years in the heat of the day and the cold of the night. He stands up against him directly. And so Jacob, really against all odds, built himself to be successful. His parents would be proud of him. He was asked 20 years before to climb the ladder. He had a vision of a ladder, and he climbed the ladder. He made it. He followed the path of truth. He tried to balance all of his wives and children. And even when his uncle tries to fool him again, it doesn't work. This time he's able to make it good. And yet here is Esau and his 400 armed men coming his ways. And it's one of those moments, oh God, what's about to happen? It's that 70s movie, oh God, because we all have our oh God moments, and we're just turning and saying, not again. And Jacob is like, really, again? I'm going to go through this. So we can imagine, as the commentators do, it's the old Jacob and the new Jacob finally meeting again. The old Jacob, the one who Esau knew, the one who plotted against his family, who fooled his father, and this epic battle within of everything going on, every part of him crying out, his whole life coming to get him. But I think it's even more than that. It's really the big questions of his life here. It's who am I? What is my life about? Where am I going? And he has this prayer to God, very beautiful. He says, Kantonti, I am small. I am unworthy of all the things you've done for me, but please do one more blessing. Save me. So God doesn't give him an answer, right? He never gets an answer to all of his questions. Who am I? Where am I going? What is it all about? But he does get a new name, Israel. And he makes an offering and he heads out to see Esau. And it doesn't turn out as he'd expected to turn out. Esau does not try to kill him. He's someone different. Esau embraces him. And Esau even says, look at your family. They're so beautiful. Who's this? Who's that? And they make up. So what is all this wrestling? So last week I saw a post on Facebook, and it was from a friend of mine, a family friend who lives in Israel, who's a doctor. And he was reposting, after everything going on in Syria, a post that he'd made 10 years earlier during the civil war in Syria. And he was one of those Israeli doctors who was treating Syrian refugees who came to him. And I think he wasn't in the north of Israel, he was in Greece, or perhaps Turkey. He went out there as part of a program. And so in this post, he speaks about all these patients he saw. And he spoke about how he felt humbled by their courage and what they'd been through. A woman with these terrible marks of abuse who was just so grateful to him and said, "You're Israeli? You're better than all the Muslims and Arabs that I encountered." Or a boy who lost his wisdom tooth and was in terrible pain. And despite it all, the boy said, I don't want to wait for a doctor to come and fix it. I'm just going to go. It doesn't matter. And my friend was reflecting, well, the chances are that there wasn't enough money for him to have the big operation to implant a tooth. There was a man who'd been tortured by Assad and couldn't walk anymore, in back pain, and just wanted him to give him a referral for an orthopedic doctor. And of course, his referrals meant nothing there, but he gave them a referral anyway. And this is what he wrote on his post. "I'll return home in a few weeks on 2 planes, and I'll proudly tell everyone what I did, what a good man I am, and what an enriching experience it was. If I need a dentist, I will go immediately, and if I need psychological treatment in a few days, I will relieve my mental load. And in Syria and Africa and Iraq and Bangladesh and so many other places, millions will continue to live on this other planet with different rules and different values. And they'll die from nothing and just be crooked and disabled. A scarred soul will be carried, and they will continue to live their lives quietly and with a good will to volunteer and help others. And I don't even know how to bridge such gaps. And what world or worlds do we live in? And although the only thing there is to do is perhaps what I'm doing now, however, it is only further illustrates the gap and increases the frustration. And I don't know why I deserve it to be on the side of the rich and smart, the moaning and the successful. And why does someone born Iranian deserve to find a job and not an Afghan? And why do Greeks deserve a photo shoot? And sorry, this is one of the young women he helped. A person from Syria doesn't. And why do Israelis deserve free education and not Eritreans? And we grow into these patterns, strange, different, and it's not so true, and it doesn't make any sense. And so finally he wrote to this post, let's hope that now for Syrians something good will happen. And I thought this is really what the struggling is for Israel, is the struggling of life and all of the questions that come to us. How to be a good person amid the world that we live in, the fate that each one of us has been given. And to go through life with questions, keep asking those questions. Why am I here and how can I help? And find that care. And there's no answer to my friend's deep questioning, only to dedicate and rededicate yourself to love, to truth, and to our holy struggling. And it is a struggling with God to demand answers to these questions. We don't always get them, and it's a struggling with ourselves to demand better from us, to be grateful for everything that we've received. And even when there are no answers, there are often blessings. Blessings that have come the way of our people over millennia. Blessings that help us grow and evolve. And through all of the struggles and the dust, to try and become a little bit more full of love, to ask more questions, to seek, to tumble, and to pray, to be given the merit to bring more light and healing into our world. Shabbat Shalom.